this team and thinks they're accidentally going to win a Super Bowl the way they're playing right now. But, certainly they're good enough to make the playoffs. And if you can make the playoffs, that's a whole new season. Anything can happen. So I think that's the way you look at it. I think you want to stay focused. And, you got some tough games on the back half of the schedule. I mentioned Baltimore, Kansas City back-to-back after the Carolina game. There's a second game against Kansas City, which you'd already mentioned. There's some tough games there, but there's some games in there that I think are winnable as well.
The podcast where the mic drops happen. This is the SHAE Show.
Okay. Ready, let's go. You wanna win, let's go. Ready, get ready, let's go. Gotta go home, 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 gotta go home. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. Don't let them stop you. Back against the wall, beat.
And welcome to the weekend edition of the SHAE Show. I am, of course, had to bring on my very special guest, Mr. Benjamin Albright from KOA Colorado. Benjamin, how are you doing on this chaotic day?
Doing all right. I've been recovering from being a little bit under the weather for the last week, so that's been fun, but certainly enjoying the great weather.
Yeah, it's been a great so far. Hope you're feeling better. Thank you for once again joining. So we're just going to kick off this episode the way we do every other episode with giving us your background, how you got started, and basically what led you to KOA Colorado.
Oh, man. I have sort of the least, I think, traditional path, to all this kind of stuff. I didn't go to school for journalism or anything of the sort. I sort of fell backwards into it. I was in the Army for a long time and got out of that. I started a company, sold that, and I was kind of looking for something to do. I guess thereafter, I'd always been, I don't know, close to the game and close to people who play the game, and so I started a Twitter account and. Originally it was more to sort of poke fun at people who were purporting to be insiders and putting out stuff that I knew to be false. That was sort of the point. It was never supposed to go anywhere. It was just supposed to poke fun at that kind of stuff. And I guess it sort of got noticed and took off. And that eventually led to offers, to host my own show or things like that. And that snowballed and eventually turned into what I do now, which is on the game day broadcast for the Denver Broncos, doing a weeknight show on one of the oldest and largest stations in America. So it's a lot of fun, and that's the nutshell version, but that's generally how I got there.
Yeah, so you spoke on doing one of the longest, working with one of the longest stations where you cover the Denver Broncos. So exactly how did that really get started from? You basically said that you were you were trolling those who were putting out false narratives, false information in the media. Who was it that reached out to you from, KOA and then said, hey, you know what? We think you're great. Let's go. Let's do this. Like, what led more into that?
Okay, so really, there were a lot of people that had reached out over the years, and I guess some of that because I started reporting some things too. I got to know Chris Mortensen really well before he passed, and and Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport are people. I talk to fairly frequently. Garofolo, those guys. They've been real supportive and encouraging. In terms of how I got to KOA. Most of it was I started doing guest spots. People would be like, "Hey, we want to have you as a guest on our show, and we'd like to, talk to you about stuff." And so I'd do that, and afterwards, I'd start to get feedback from these, producers or program directors, like, "Hey, you sort of have a little bit of a knack for this. Have you ever thought about doing your own thing?" And so I actually bought some airtime at a place here in Denver called Mile High Sports. They did a broker to air deal, and to kind of get some reps, get some things like that in, and as I made friends with some of the people in the local media market. One of the people I made friends with is a guy named Ryan Edwards. And at the time, there was a different station in town, also owned by iHeart, which owns KOA. that was called Orange and Blue 760. He used to have me on his show. The program director there at the time, Tim Spence, heard it and was like, "Hey, we really like this." And when they reorganized and then moved most of that over to KOA, I kind of got some audition tryouts and things took off from there.
Sorry, was on mute for whatever reason. So from your KOA
Hey,
days,
your voice is cutting out there. I can't quite hear you. It sounded like a transformer talking for a second there. I apologize.
yeah, you're good. So I was saying, from your KOA days to like now, what would you say would be the difference between when you were working at when you first started at KOA to where you are now? What is the difference?
Um, when I first started at KOA, I didn't really know much about journalism or the industry. I was just some guy with a large social media following who had some information, and so I think the biggest part of the difference between where I was then and where I am now is professional growth. Tim Spence, the guy who hired me, moved on, but they have a new program director at KOA, Dave Tepper, who I love. I mean, that guy's phenomenal. Really has helped me sort of go from being a guy that has information and is on the air to being a radio host. And so Ryan, the guy I mentioned before, Ryan Edwards, who kind of sort of got me in at KOA, we did the show together, Broncos Country Tonight, for a while. They moved him on to daytime to drive the afternoon show. And so now I paired up and I moved sort of into a different role. Like I started off as Ryan was the driver and I was sort of the guy with the information. Well, now I'm sort of the driver of the show, and Nick Ferguson, former Bronco and Houston Texan, is my radio partner. And it's a little bit, it's a different role. It's a growth, but it's fun to learn different aspects of, I guess, how to do the job.
Yeah. So just in case anyone wants to go and watch, what is the best time to tune in to KOA Colorado, where you cover the Denver Broncos? What would you say is the best times?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you again. Again, it cut out. I apologize.
Yeah, you're good. I was
There we
just
go.
asking. So, when can people like? What time of the day can people expect coverage for the Denver Broncos on your KOA Colorado radio station show?
Oh, well, my show starts at 6 p.m. It runs till 11, but the last 2 hours are what's called replay hours. Basically, they take 2 hours from earlier and flip it for the people who might not have been able to listen earlier. So really, it's live from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. You can always stream it or listen to it live on the air, or I mean, you can download it. We've got the podcast up, and frankly, the bulk of our listeners are people that listen to it on the podcast and then comment the next morning. So we do enjoy the interaction live with fans and having all that, but I love podcast listeners too. And I would say that that's probably the bulk of our listeners tend to be podcast listeners, even though we do have a fun live crew that does listen to us most nights.
Okay, all right. So, speaking of the Denver Broncos, they're doing pretty well this year based on the stage that they're at. As we just shown, Thursday night, where they came off a huge win in New Orleans. Sean Payton's epic return from, to New Orleans since he departed, I believe it was 2019. They defeated the New Orleans Saints 33-10. So overall, what was your reaction, and how do you believe that energy from that game can display within the rest of the season?
Well, a win's a win, and you certainly want to always carry that momentum forward. I thought it was a pretty big, pretty convincing win. I think that allows you to have some belief in yourself. The Saints were a pretty banged up football team. I mean, you're missing your quarterback, you're missing your 4 offensive linemen, your top 2 receivers, Taysom Hill, who plays in that Jokum role. I mean, they were missing a lot. So I don't sit there and take a lot away from that victory in the sense that, they're dominant. They're a dominant football team. But they do have a very good defense. We've seen that we have a big enough sample size over the course of the season so far to know that they have a really good defense. And they were without Pat Surtain that night as well, their best player. They're only first rounder on that defense. I think the things that you could take away from it are, hey, you ran the ball really well. Something you haven't done effectively, consistently throughout the season, and that's something you're going to need to continue to do in order to maximize the rookie quarterback that you have, who's still growing and a work in progress. So I think if you're a Broncos fan, I think you look at that and you say, okay, this is another building block in the foundation to build and grow this thing and hope that it can become something. I mean, you get the Carolina Panthers coming to town next. They're I hate to dog anybody, but I think they're not a very good football team. And so you would look at that and say, this is a game we can win. You hope to go out and win it. You do. Then you move one step closer to maybe making the playoffs.
Yeah, making the playoffs. We speak on that. I found the win pretty impressive based off everything the Broncos was went through. You released Russell Wilson. You took on over a $35 million cap hit. Russell Wilson's down in the Steelers. He will be starting this week. I don't think that should be, but it's out of my hands in that matchup. But from going from Russell Wilson to rookie quarterback Bo Nix, what do you think is the difference now in this offense this year?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, because you're going from not only two different players, you're going from two different people. Whatever you think of Russell Wilson, his personality is very curated. His personality is very, we'll call it social media friendly, for multiple reasons. The memes for one, and then it's designed to be a very family friendly persona, and there are a lot of people that say that he comes across as inauthentic. I just think that that's authentically him. I just think that's who he is. Bo Nix is a little more passionate, a little more gritty, on the field. He's a guy that will drop a cuss word here or there. I think we all saw the interaction between him and Sean Payton, where Sean was yelling at him and he started giving Sean the business right back. Where you juxtapose that with Russ last year in Detroit, where Sean Payton yelled at Russell Wilson and Russ just kind of sat there and took it. And so, I think that there's a personality difference first and foremost, and I think that's a bit infectious in terms of the offense. And then second of all, there's a play style difference. Bo is a more safe quarterback. Get it out. We're not going to take negative plays. We may not have as many explosive plays, but we're not going to take negative plays. Russ is a very high variance quarterback. There's going to be some sacks and stuff like that, but there's also going to be some spectacular, I bought time and made an incredible throw type plays. And Russ, that can be effective if you're doing it right. Russ was top 5 in the NFL in touchdowns when he got benched last year. Number 1 in fourth quarter comebacks. It's just, the people who are saying he's washed. I look at that and I'm like, well, the math isn't mathing here on that, but he's not the same player he used to be. It happens with age. So I wish him the best. I'm not one of the Denver people that hates Russell Wilson by any means. I wish him the best, but. At the same time, I think this team needed to turn the page and did.
Yeah, and it was clear that you can argue that was two good pictures, him and Sean Payton, that just did not create a good photograph, if that makes sense. So
Right.
I think that's just what it was. I don't think Russ was happy any there more in Denver. And then him and Sean Payton clearly had such strong personality traits that was differential. So that's what led to the departure. So, it was hard for Russell Wilson, I think, to leave Denver, because I think he was for Denver. But when you're not wanted, when you feel not wanted, and then you have a coach who kind of seems like he cares but doesn't care for you, it leads to, possible mouthy altercations that just did not come out yet. It can lead to basically what it led to now, somebody having to leave. And Russell Wilson decided, the Broncos organization, made the call. So they decided it had to be Russell Wilson. But flipping the script here just a little from, we speaking on rookie quarterback Bo Nix. Overall, what do you think of him this season? From week 1 to now, week 7. What do you think of him and his progression this year, and how you think he can carry that for the remainder of the season and possibly the future of your organization?
Well, I think he's a guy that doesn't make the same mistake very often. I think he's a guy that wants to learn, wants to be better. I think he wants to be passionate and fiery. I think he does bring some elements to the table that you certainly like. I sort of felt like this team did him a bit of a disservice in the preseason when they were dialing up game plans. Nobody does that in the preseason. They're dialing up game plans against the third stringers of the Colts and the Packers, and they're playing all their starters, and it made Bo Nix look a lot better than perhaps he was. He really was at that point. And the expectations were so high that I felt like it did him a disservice because there was no way he was going to come out the gate and meet those, and of course he didn't. I think Bo can be a starter in this league. I do. I think the game's still a little too fast for him at times. I think he's a little nervous at times. We saw the Thursday night game where he airmailed a pass. He had two open receivers and put the ball in between either of them where neither could get it. A couple of passes that were high that, sailed on him a little, that kind of stuff. He's a guy who's nervous early in games. And, I think once he settles down and just kind of settles into that role, he'll be a lot better. I compared him to Derek Carr coming out of college. I maintain that comparison. I think he can be a top third of the league quarterback. I don't think he's a top 5 guy. I don't think he's in the Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson realm of quarterbacks ever. But I do think he's a guy that you can definitely win with and be in the top third of the league. And I hope that he gets there.
Yeah, and you can look at, these past a couple of weeks, even though we're only in the 6-7 games this year, and you can see a lot of promise in him, in my opinion. I think he has potential. And I feel like if the Broncos does what they should do, which is build a competent team around him, starting with the offensive line, we can see more than what we expected out of Bo Nix. And being the 12th overall pick in this past draft, the 2024 NFL draft, it definitely puts a lot of pressure on him due to him being the one that was painted by many people to replace a future Hall of Fame quarterback in the likes of Russell Wilson, who was cut around that time that he was drafted and brought to Denver. So I think, with all of that on top of the deficiencies of the Broncos, we have not seen yet the ceiling of him, but yet at the same time, we're possibly looking at the floor. And that is a good sign, in my opinion, from Denver, because it's like, if this is the floor and we're sitting at this division 4-3, possibly tied for at least second place, no one expects you to even be there. We can only imagine what the ceiling can be like. And I understand that could come off as false hope, but based off of what we're seeing, and every week he's progressing. He's not regressing, he's progressing. Your team is in a competitive, nature for a possible playoff spot. You don't know how this division can play out because you don't never know about injuries, things like that. This can possibly be a team that we're seeing come January in the postseason.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got a good enough defense for sure. The question is the offense, and so far at that floor that you mentioned, it's been good enough to win some games. And I think that as long as it's continuing to win football games like that, that puts you in a great spot. Like I mentioned, you got the Carolina Panthers coming up. That feels like a winnable game. After that, the schedule starts to get a little tough. You got Baltimore and Kansas City. That's going to be a real litmus test. But I think that I think you're right. I think if this is the floor and you're able to be competitive and win football games, well, when he grows, that's a scary thing for the rest of the division.
Yeah, it's especially because if I'm not mistaken, you either split with the Chiefs the year before or last season. So when you split with a team like that and you practically been splitting with everyone else, and you're now saying, if I'm not mistaken, 1-0 or 2 or 1-1 in your division with 2 matchups against the Chiefs coming up, those matchups can mean more than what people were saying, because people looked at the Broncos and was probably like, this is a bye week for this team, that team, that team. But so far, it's not looking like that. This could be a team that could compete now and possibly win later.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's exactly it. You want to go out and be competitive. That's where they're at right now. Anytime you have a rebuild or you're redoing a team or turning a team over, that kind of stuff, it's sort of a 4-year plan, right? I mean, you're going to lose big the first year because you're tearing it down, right? But by year 2, you want to be losing small, and then by year 3, you want to be kind of winning small, and then by year 4, you want to be winning big. And I think that they're in the lose small, win small phase right now, where they're kind of maybe a little ahead of themselves because they have the rookie quarterback, in the fact that they're winning small more often than they're losing small. And so, like I said, you get the winning record right now, and you get Carolina coming to town, and who knows? You win that one, who knows?
Yep, who knows? But we're in NFL Week 7. Obviously, like we already established, the Broncos are in the mix right now for a possible playoff spot. They're sitting tied second and currently in the AFC West division. So what would be the Week 7 matchups you think, if you're Broncos Nation, to Broncos country, what would be the matchups this week that they should look out for?
Well, I mean, you got to look inside division and then first, and then you want to go to conference, kind of play second. So the Chiefs are taking on the 49ers. That's going to be an interesting one, because the 49ers are a good football team, and you want to kind of see, what they're able to do. If Kansas City gets slowed down by that, their offense has been a little bit off this year. And if that's the case, and good teams are able to take advantage of that, well, what can we copy from what they do in an effort to stop them? I think, the Chargers, I think they're taking on the Cardinals at Arizona. I'm not sure there's much out of that game that you want. I mean, you root for the Cardinals to win just because you root for the Cardinals to win. And if the Raiders, are they on bye this week, or they're playing the Rams. Not a whole lot to take out of that one either. You just kind of hope the Rams win that one. So you get the whole division really kind of going up against the NFC West, which I think is interesting, coincidentally interesting. But Kansas City's got the top of it with San Francisco, and you want to see what the other teams could do to kind of slow down. I think the best thing to do is just root for your division foes to lose, and see if you can emulate any of the ways that those teams were able to beat them.
Yeah, and here's the fun thing: they will be in second place this season. After this week, if the Chargers does lose to the Cardinals, and that's the thing, and then you will be possibly 2-3 games behind Kansas City with 2 matchups, if I'm not mistaken, coming up. Those can be huge. So we flipped the script a little bit. We speaking on the 2024 NFL season. Sitting currently in your division at 4-3. Possibly can be tied for second after this week, but you're currently third right now. You're above 500. So what would you say would be the expectations for the remainder of the 2024 NFL season?
Well, I think first and foremost, continue to grow the quarterback. That portion of it, I think, is tantamount. And then you sort of go from there. You're hoping, if you get through, you get through halfway through the season and you're 4-3, 5-3, you're kind of hoping to replicate that on the back end, right? Come away 10-6, 9-7, being above 500 for the first time since, honestly, since Super Bowl 50. Would be a start. Making the playoffs would be a start. I don't think anybody looks at this team and thinks they're accidentally going to win a Super Bowl the way they're playing right now. But certainly they're good enough to make the playoffs. And if you can make the playoffs, that's a whole new season. Anything can happen. So I think that's the way you look at it. I think you want to stay focused, and you got some tough games on the back half of the schedule. I mentioned Baltimore, Kansas City back to back after the Carolina game. There's a second game against Kansas City, which you'd already mentioned. There's some tough games there, but there's some games in there that I think are winnable as well. And so I think if you come away from the first half of the season 5-3, if you can do that in the second half of the season, hey, you're probably in a playoff. 10 wins is probably enough to get you a playoff spot.
Yeah, definitely. AFC is, pretty tough this year, but the Broncos right there in the mix. So we mentioned the matchup against Carolina. After that is Baltimore. Then it's Kansas City, in Arrowhead. Then you're back at home against Atlanta. You're at Las Vegas. You host Cleveland at home and Indianapolis at home back-to-back weeks before you travel to LA to take on the Chargers. Then you travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, and then you finish the season off at home against the Chiefs. So these games alone, what would you expect their record to be based off of the opponents that I just mentioned?
I think 8-9, 9-8, somewhere in there. You probably win the Carolina game. You probably lose the 3 after that, and then it's really a question of, can you win the 3 after that. And so I think at the end of the day, I think 9-8, 8-9 is the most likely outcome. And then after that, the ball bounces your way or somebody gets hurt, which, you don't want to root for, but if it happens, a quarterback goes down, that kind of thing, you may stand a better chance in some games than some others. I think you can win the game at LA. I'm not sure that the Cincinnati, Kansas City are necessarily super winnable games, but we'll see. Like I said, Kansas City's offense has not been carrying its weight this year the way it has in previous years. So maybe this is the year you catch them napping, kind of like last year a little bit. Yeah, I think 9-8 is probably the outcome you circle. It's above 500. It's the best record that they've had since Super Bowl 50, and maybe gets you a wild card.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. Honestly, I would have the Broncos right now at 10-7 because I think that these games for this defense, I believe this defense is going to keep them in games more. So it's really up to whether you could do what you did in New Orleans, but like we mentioned, that's practically depleted New Orleans football team. You got the Panthers coming up, so that could be another win. But if you can keep, Javonte Williams momentum up, and Bo Nix can basically play game manager, and you can get some plays to Cortland Sutton, I think that this team can do some damage. I'm not trying to give you guys any false hope, but this team could be a lot. I feel like this is a team for the past 2 to 3 seasons who has been better than what their record says. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think so. Specifically last year, I think they were a little bit better than their record. The Nathaniel Hackett year was sort of wild. I don't really know what to do with that. That was one of the weirdest years of my life, watching that unfold. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think they're a little better than their record. Certainly, they're playing really, really good defense right now, which is going to keep you in games. And if you can play good defense and run the ball late in the year, you got as good a chance as anybody.
Yep, and like you said, get in the dance, anything can happen because it's a whole new season. So flipping the script to the season, we're here. Preview of Week 8 versus Carolina. So overall, what are you going to go into that game and expect if you are the Denver Broncos and if you're a Broncos fan? What should they expect heading into this matchup?
Well, Carolina gets Jonathan Brooks back this week, and so you kind of want to keep your eye on that. The 1-2 punch of him and Chuba Hubbard might make their offense go a little bit better. Andy Dalton at the quarterback position there has been more effective than Bryce Young. So, you kind of know what you got with Andy Dalton. It's going to be efficient, short passing, and, you can kind of sit on that. Not a lot of deep balls, that kind of stuff. Defensively, interestingly enough, the defensive coordinator, Gerald Vero, was the defensive coordinator in that aforementioned Hackett year I just talked about. Broncos have familiarity with what he wants to do on defense, and a matter of fact, have some players over there, Josie Jewell being one of them, who used to be Denver Broncos. So I think you know what Carolina wants to do on defense, and that'll give you a little bit of an advantage or insight as far as that goes. Offensively, they've been kind of a work in progress. They don't really have a lot of explosive playmakers, but that 1-2 punch they have in the run game might be something that Dave Canales, kind of leans on. And so you really want to kind of get a look and get some tape on Jonathan Brooks this week because you don't have a lot on him. He hadn't played yet.
Yeah, and the Panthers, to me, so far, you can argue it can possibly be a team that's better than their record, but they're 1-5. Broncos are 4-3. Could possibly be rolling into that matchup 5-3 against Baltimore after that. So, what do you think would be the keys for the Broncos to win this matchup? At home against Carolina.
Well, it's a home game, and you're going to be considered the favorite. I think the main thing is not to turn the football over. Don't put your offense in negative space in negative situations. Run the football effectively. Stay ahead of the chains, and take the points where they are, whether that's field goals or whatever. I think if you can do that, your defense can certainly hang with Carolina. I don't think there's anything on the Carolina offense that particularly frightens anybody. I do think I think Carolina's they're not a horrible football team, but they're just not all that good right now. I do love their coach, Dave Canales, so he's a good guy. I think, run the football effectively and play your brand of defense. I think it's a home game for you, so take the time from New Orleans to kind of rest up and make sure everybody's healthy. Get in there, and you don't have to come out there and empty out the playbook and all this kind of stuff against this team. This is one where you want to get in, win, and do it healthy, and then get ready for the following slate of games, which is very, very tough.
Yeah. So what do you think would be the keys for the Broncos defense to put their offense in a position to capitalize and win these games?
Don't let Carolina run the ball. Don't let it become a possession game where they keep it close and it becomes a coin flip down at the end and you put yourself in a position to lose. Don't let them run the ball. Force Carolina to play from behind. Force them to throw. It's their weakness. And if you can do that, then you'll get out to a lead and hold it.
All right, Mr. Albright. That's all I have for you right now. If you guys are not, please tune in to Broncos coverage on KOA Colorado Radio, as he will be covering your fellow Denver Broncos and other Denver sports teams. So before we go, is there anything that we should expect or look out for within your content or KOA Colorado in general?
I mean, we just try to have fun and talk ball. Where at the end of the day, we're all just dudes and chicks trying to talk ball and have some fun, right? So, not any special content events, but if you haven't, I would encourage everybody to give us a listen, and hopefully you enjoy yourself.
Yep, I'm definitely gonna listen. I already subscribed to you guys on Apple, so we're here. Mr. Albright, once again, that's all I have for you right now. I would love to thank you on this hectic weekend for joining the show. If you guys have not already, please give this man a follow for more, Broncos coverage and other Denver sports teams at Albright NFL, both on X, which is formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. All right, this has been the SHAE Max Show. This is your host, SHAE, signing out. See y'all next week.
Get ready, let's go! They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you.